All right, guys, welcome back. Round two of Digital Wednesday with Coach Ben Mathis. We got an action-packed session for you today, as we always do. Ben, how you doing over there in Raleigh, North Carolina these days?
Rocking and rolling. The sun's out. It's a good day.
Yeah, I hear you. That was stopped short a little bit of like sun's out and guns out. It's just sun's out for right now.
We can't talk about the gym's closed. I can't talk about it. It's heartbreaking.
Right. I hear you. Well, we got a lot of good stuff we're going to dig in with you guys on today. First, we're going to talk about why we believe the month of April is the most important month in the entire calendar year of 2020. So Ben, you and I and Debbie and the rest of our team were talking about this on a coach's call earlier this week. And I'll kind of give a little bit of thought from my end, and then I'd love to get your feedback for the crew as well. And this will set as a bit of a primer to lead into our Digital Wednesday content. You guys are probably already starting to feel and see this in your markets, where most of your competition is starting to check out a little bit. They're starting to take an extended spring break, maybe even starting to coast a little bit, and they might even be riding their pipeline just a little bit too. They've got stuff under contract that they're holding together that's going to close in April. And we believe the big risk there is that it gives a little bit of a false sense of security around what's coming. Now, those of you who know us well know that we are naturally optimistic people. We are naturally people who favor strategy and seeing around corners. So anything we say today, I want you to take through the lens of being proactive and optimistic. So, Ben, what are you seeing in the Raleigh market? And then what would you say is really important for our folks about the month of April? And then I'll add a few little thoughts to it as well.
Everything you just said is true. For Raleigh, we're seeing the typical market activity. Showings are way down as expected. We are seeing that there are like 50 to 60% less showings year over year compared to last March. We're still seeing the thing I went back to my team with today at our team meeting was there are still people out looking at homes. We're still seeing foot traffic in homes. We're still seeing buyers buy houses and sellers still put their houses on the market. To me, it's turning into a time frame conversation. That's why the month of April is so important. This is not the time to coast. This is the time to set ourselves up for the end of April, beginning of May, and then the rest of the year really hinges on this month. So for us, we pretty much dug back into it's time to triple down on lead generation. And I know we're going to talk a little bit today about some strategies and tactics and conversations you can have with your database and inbound lead tactics, things of that nature. Right now, and this is something you guys can scribble in your notes, and this is something I'm saying on all my calls to my coaching clients that are here. You're going to hear this throughout the rest of the week and probably the rest of the month. Our best practices just became our minimum standards. Our best practices just became our minimum standards. So if you coach with us, you know that we talk about expectations and best practices for your team. Or as an individual agent. And for us, your best practice was kind of the suggestion of this is what you have to do to get business. You don't have to do this because we're not going to fire if you don't. We expect you to do these things to stay here. So best practices weren't mandatory. And I think going forward, they have become mandatory for us to do. So lead generation at a very high level has become mandatory. And just based on what we're seeing in the market, everything's humming along, but we're seeing listing inventory shrink. We're seeing the walk-through traffic shrink. So that natural constrictions, we have that long tail effect where it's going to hit us in the next couple of months. And to be ahead of that is building the pipeline up, because I think there's going to be a surge. It all depends on what you do now, though, to be in front of that wave or behind it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think it's a great point. And I mean, if you guys were to think about everything, we believe everything exists along sort of a spectrum or a continuum. So as you're taking some notes on some of this stuff, again, setting the course for the meat that we're going to dive into today, on one end of the spectrum, it would be like the far negative extreme of the spectrum would be panic. And on the total other end of the spectrum would be amazing or great or whatever the most positive version of the word would be. And then there are all these other possible scenarios in the middle with some sort of a neutral midpoint. And the cool thing about this business, if you want to think about it this way, is you can predict the future. You can look at what's in your pipeline right now and see 60 days, 90 days into the future. And so if you were to say panic mode is this is what my pipeline looks like, and quantify that in active listings, active buyers, current under contract, knowing, to Ben's point, we've got this additional headwind now of things are either going to fall out a little bit more or your pipeline's going to get pushed a little bit more, is here are the panic numbers. here are the neutral numbers, and then here are the numbers that are the great, those super positive versions of those. And just please don't let June and July sneak up on you. Now, I know everybody who's on this right now and who's going to watch this recording, your top agents who are looking for solutions, otherwise you wouldn't be here. A lot of your competition, though, is going to take April off, and it is going to bite them in the you-know-what come June and July. And while I don't wish any ill will on anyone, it also creates a massive amount of opportunity for you if you're willing to just go do the work, more so than you ever have, maybe in your entire business career. Do not hear this as alarmist. Hear this as opportunistic. So Ben, in the work that we all do together, we talk about what we call the 4 Ps, and those 4 Ps being productivity, projects, people, and personal. And for today, I'd really like for us to dig in on some of the productivity pieces, and some of it's going to tie a little bit to projects, yet productivity. You and I were talking about this as we were preparing for the call. We sense that a lot of people are, if they're not careful, going to let their foot off the gas on productivity and use this as a time to dig in on projects. So I know you and I are in alignment to say that that's not necessarily the right answer right now. So you want to build on that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah. I think that this is not an excuse not to talk to people, right? Just because we're social distancing and I can't give anybody a high five, I'm still going to elbow tap you, but we can't get away from talking to people in general. And I do believe the message has to change a little bit, right? We have to change our messaging around that. It's not this mindset though that nobody wants to talk about real estate. We're finding inside of our database, there's a demand for it right now. They want to hear positive news. They want to hear what's going on in the world inside of real estate, especially in their local market. What's going on, right? They're hungry to hear somebody, especially what we're finding is when we call them, they're hungry to hear a voice beyond their spouses or their children. So you're kind of like that person calling them, and if you frame it in that mindset, it's a really good conversation for you to have with people. So database-wise, this is something we do a little differently too, Bill, and I mentioned this to you earlier. I think that people look at calling their databases. The only reason I'm calling them is to ask about real estate. And this is something we shifted on last year within our team. And now we talk about going 4 levels deep in our database when we talk to every single person. And this is one of the qualifications we use when we're looking at the healthiness of our database overall. So I think when people think of database, they think of level 1 is what I call it. And that's just the information phase. That's just, I have a name, I have a number, I have an email, I have, a home address. And that means I have a database. And for me, I go, well, do you really though? How many places have they given that information to, if you think about it? Grocery stores have that information, right? If you sign up for one of their shopper cards, does that really constitute a database of people that know you, like you, and trust you? So for us, we said, okay, what's the next level? And level 2 for us is dates. So I look at birthdays, anniversaries, home closing dates, family dates, family birthdays, important things that happen in their world. Do you know the dates around all of that? If you have that in your database, then you're at a second level. Third level then, and guys, just as a side note here, when you're talking to your database, these are all things you can talk about to them right now. If you have nothing else to talk about, these are great things to learn about your people. So level 3 is favorites. What's their favorite food, their favorite restaurant, their favorite flowers, their favorite hobbies, their favorite sports teams, learn about them a little bit. And then the 4th level is the one that I think is the most critical right now. And this ties into marketing later, which we'll talk about when we talk about funnels and everything. But it's real-time events. Are you paying attention to your people in real time? And when I think of real-time events, I think of transition moments in people's lives. Do you know when someone got married? Do you know when someone got divorced? Do you know when they had a baby? Do you know when there was a graduation in their family? New jobs, all of that kind of stuff are real-time events that you can connect with them on and show that you're part of their world. And I'll tell you, I remember growing up, there was a dentist that sent me a $2 bill on every one of my birthdays. I can't remember his name, but I remember that dentist that sent me a $2 bill at every one of my birthdays. I got a little card with something about my teeth and a little $2 bill in it. And that's how he kept in touch with us. But real-time events and things of that nature, you can really tie into people in real time right now. These are conversations you can have with your database. So I would challenge anybody who's saying, I can't be productive right now. People don't want to talk about real estate. I promise you this, first of all, ask any of these questions. Have these conversations with people about any of these levels of data that you're missing, right? Assess the gaps in your database. And then from there, watch the questions come about real estate. That's what we're finding is after we ask these questions and talk with our people, the very next thing they ask, because the stock market's so volatile right now, they're saying, how's the real estate market? And that's where you have to have your statistics of success and know what's going on in your market and be that the local economist of choice for them so they know what's going on. So it's not about leading in with the mentality of I'm going to go in and get a sale here. It's about connecting with your database and having a really healthy conversation with them and having this framework of do you have all this data in there, or are you missing things, or what gaps can you fill in over the next couple of weeks?
Sure. Well, I think it's a great point. You know, we talk a lot about what I call the difference between hunting and fishing. And so we're going to talk more fishing, which is marketing, in just a second. For right now, we're very purposefully in today's segment talking about the hunting aspect of things. So let's put a multiple on this, Ben. So let's just say that I think we would all agree that a month ago, we had a pretty good tailwind that we could sort of ride the wind if we wanted to. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, that wind turned in the opposite direction, and now we got a pretty significant headwind. And I think everybody who's watching this would agree with that. And so, therefore, we're going to have an increase in activities. We're going to have an increase in the outbound effort, an increase in the contacts being made, et cetera, et cetera. So how many more, Ben, there's just no right or wrong answer to this question. How many more, or what's the multiple? Is it 1.5? Is it 2? Is it 10? You know, what's the X factor on that for you?
In terms of lead generation or conversations for our people, I can use specifics if that would help. So for our people, we encourage, remember I said best practices. For us, it's 50 people a day having conversations, and that's text, email, phone calls, but having a real estate conversation somewhere in that context. For us, we're saying 100 to 150 people a day right now. I mean, that's paring down to between 4 and 6 hours of concentrated lead generation time a day. And again, this is about building the pipeline and finding the buyers that will be here in the next several weeks or towards May when all this stuff gets lifted or whatever the time frame is. That's what we're doing right now. So for us, it's a very much I would say 3x our best practice. So that's a pretty high amount.
Sure. Well, I think that gives a good corollary to folks where if they were to say, well, in my world or in my business, that number was 20, now it's 40 or 50, or it was 10, and now it's 30. Which inevitably begs the question is now that I've worked through, or I will over the next week or two, work through my database, which as a side note, the fastest you can get through them with the types of conversations Ben was talking about, the better off you're going to be as a result. Now we kind of go over into marketing land, and this would be a good transition point for us because last week on Digital Wednesday, you talked about the seminar that you guys did and the results you got there. You talked a little bit about contests and how to put people in the funnel there. And then this week, you're going to dig deep into talking about the building out of listing assets and listing videos and a little bit of funnel type stuff there. So let's do this, if you don't mind. Can you give kind of a quick recap for those who didn't have a chance to attend last week or watch the video from last week? Very quick recap on seminars and virtual events. Very quick recap on contests and why one would use that. And then let's go deep on the listing video work.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll start with seminars. So that's something I always tell people that I'm always thinking of how can I get in front of the most people at one time? Because to me, that's leveraging my time to the best effect. So before we got on lockdown, we couldn't go virtual. I would say, well, let's go to a business. Let's go to their HR department. Say, can you put me in front of a room of your people? I'll bring them lunch. And 40 to 60 people would show up. We usually pull 10 people out of that room that would raise their hands and want more information. It was usually 2 or 3 sales within the next 30 days we'd get out of doing that type of activity. And again, we're adding all of that to our database every time we do it, 40 to 60 people. So the thought process to me was, how can we take that online? So we started doing online seminars, and the first one was how this pandemic can help you buy a home in 2020. And then we just walked through simply the advantages we see, the differences in this market versus 2008, some data around all of that, and then helping them through the next steps of helping them build a game plan out. And we promoted that on Facebook, on our Facebook page. We did an event for it. We used Eventbrite to push it out. We used a Zoom webinar. It didn't cost us any. Well, the Zoom webinar cost us $15 a month. Other than that, it didn't cost a whole lot of money for us to put that together and just run it very quickly. And we had pretty good results out of it. We had well over 200 people attend it. And I mentioned in last week's video, so if you didn't watch it, go watch it. But we ended up breaking the webinar, and I made a lot of mistakes on it. But it worked out really well because we learned a lot from it. And we had well over 60 people raise their hand to talk to a lender or an agent. They wanted more information from us. So at the end of the day, it all worked out for the better. At the same time, there are things that you can do to minimize that, which we cover in the previous video. And the idea behind all of that is doing those type of events for everything that you're doing right now. So if you have a listing presentation, go do a seminar around it. If you have an investor presentation put together, go do a seminar around it. If you do have anything on like financial stuff right now, go do a seminar, put it online, let people come to it. Even if one person shows up, you can record it later, use it down the line for future content, which we talked about content repositories. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. Overall, though, there's a lot of advantages to putting this stuff online and using it down the line for yourself. So the next thing we talked about was contests. And one of the big things right now is we know that a lot of people are canceling their client events that they had, or they're being canceled because they're not holding them. So the question was, well, what can I do in place of that to still, brand a little bit, put my name out there? And one thing we do every year, and we do multiple things now, but the main thing we do every year is a teacher appreciation when it's back to school time. And we'll do a contest, put it on our page, and have anybody nominate teachers, and we send it out to our database, and we promote it in that manner, and it gets a lot of community interaction. People see our name. We get a lot of referrals out of it because people see that that we're out there trying to help our teachers, help our community. And you can do anything from gift card giveaways, you can do sponsorships, you can have your lenders pitch in on this as well, or your partners to help offset the cost of it, and then brand with them. But contest is a really great way to engage not just your database, but the whole community. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that right now because everybody's home. So if they're home and they're on their screens, which again, I said last week, we look at our screen time on our phone. I'm sure it's like the phone's going, what are you doing right now? This is ridiculous. The increased amount.
Ben, I think we might have lost you on the audio there. There we go. I think we got you.
My headset cut out. It does that. But yeah, so contests. Yeah, so contests are a big thing, I think, to really get your branding out there in the community overall. And it's definitely something that you can put together pretty quickly. It's a simple graphic. You can shoot a video for it if you want to, or you can just do a simple graphic. And then the way I like to run it is getting the community to nominate people or interact with the post itself. So I know there was someone who did one around the restaurants right now and said, we're going to donate gift cards to restaurants, and they had you nominate local restaurants, and they would choose a winner out of that. There's a lot of creative things you can do around contests right now to drive interaction and branding opportunities for your business.
Sure. Well, let's touch on that for just a second. And so I'm going to put you on the spot here. However, I know you're more than capable of handling this. Talk a little bit about ad copy and pattern interrupt imagery and stuff like that. Because I know there are a whole lot of people who a week or two ago decided they were going to get really into digital. And of course, you created an entire course around that people could check out. Yet if you were to give them the short best practices on writing catchy ad copy and the use of pattern interrupt image or video, what would be your couple of minute spiel on that?
Yeah. So I love good ad copy. It's one of my obsessions. So one thing you can do in your Facebook feed, by the way, is if you find good ad copy, you can click on their ads and they'll start feeding you more of it, so then you can mimic it down the road. Just a little side tip on that. But overall, I like short, punchy content. So whenever you're writing an ad copy, people don't like reading long form paragraphs where it's all bunched together. So make sure that your ad copy is broken apart. And then think of colors, right? When we look at your Facebook feeds or your Twitter feeds or Instagram or any feed overall, the colors that the app itself uses are very neutral. So they're blue, they're white. Instagram lets the photos pretty much dominate the feed. So you have to think of, how do I catch somebody's eye? And it's typically really, really pretty pictures of houses work really well if you're trying to do a pattern interrupt. Or if you're using emojis, anything bright colors. So I'm a fan of like the sun emoji or the explosion emoji, things like that, and use that to highlight points in your post that you're trying to draw the eye to. There's a lot of good research out there where they've shown how the eyes actually interact with a phone and that we don't just go straight down a post like most people think. We don't read top to bottom. We actually skip down and then we follow back up. So the image will catch your eye, and then you go back up, and then you're hunting for the main points, because let's admit it, we're lazy as humans. We don't really want to go through all that reading and say, what the heck is this post actually about? So using good emojis and broken up copy with good punchy content in there to capture their attention, highlight your main points. And then the last thing is if you're directing them to a link, have it above, because eventually the ad will compact on the screen and it'll say see more. You want to be above that if you have a link. Put the link above that. And of course, we always advise brand your links, so you can track them using Bitly or some other source, so you can track where people are clicking to your content from. But overall, I would say one of my favorite lines in terms of how to write headlines is how to Frank Kern brought this up, by the way. If you don't know who Frank Kern is, he used to be a guy with this really awesome hippie hair, and now he's all business looking, but he's one of the best internet marketers in the world. He's incredible. So his content that he puts out there is just a lot of free stuff if you're trying to figure out how to write copy for things. But he's always talking about how to yay without boo. So something good without bad, or you can flip it and go something bad and something good. So basically you're giving them the problem and the solution. So that's a way to structure your content. How to buy a home without having to look at 5,000 properties, right? So you're giving them a problem and a solution. So always think of that in your headlines as well, to capture their attention and let them know that you're solving a problem that they may not even know they have at that point.
Sure. Absolutely. Great point. Well, let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of today. One of the things we began talking about with our clients 2 or 3 weeks ago was the importance of doing various types of listing video, whether it's walking tour video or leveraging existing virtual tours or Matterports or any type of digital assets that are out there. And I know you've come up with a handful of different ways to do that and offering some suggestions for the folks. So I'm going to turn the stage completely over to you now, so you can just sort of talk through all of this, and I might pop back in a little bit later and ask a question or two. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. I love talking. Let's do it.
All right, fire away.
So a couple of the things that we kept on getting questions around was listing content. How do I promote videos? A lot of you guys are doing walkthrough videos, or you have 3D tours, or if you haven't done 3D tours, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because there's some tools out there that you guys can leverage that if you don't have access to Matterport, or there's limited supply in your city, or it's ridiculously expensive in your area because only one person has it, there's different tools you can use out there to produce 3D dollhouse images at a very much lower cost. And we're leveraging those to get into conversations with potential prospects like FSBOs or expireds, and having that conversation with them around that. So the first piece is really looking at if you're creating listing videos in general, people are saying, well, what do I do with those? There's a handful of things you can do with those. The main thing we look at doing is putting them on as educational content. So when we think of funnels, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, a big piece of that when you're trying to convert people in, depending on what funnel it is, you're trying to convert them into a lead or a prospect that you want them to sign up on your site. And what we promote or do with that content is educate people. And part of that will be your listing videos. And you can take, we call it B-roll, right? So that's a side video that you get during events. So A-roll is like focused on the main person, and B-roll will be like you walking into the house. You can take B-roll video and use that inside of your ads for people to show them how you promote properties. One of the biggest things we do with education, if you're thinking of how can I create an educational video, think of how to. So maybe you have a video of one of your properties that was really, really pretty and it's really well staged, and you're really proud of how it came out. You did a walkthrough video on it. You can go into Zoom just like this, pull the video up and just talk over top of the video about the staging that you did, and give people like, here are the 5 key things on how to stage your home. You'll notice the seller did this in this room and did this in this room. And then that's a landing page for somebody, or you can use it as content to educate people inside of your database. When we're talking about funnels and nurture plans, it's a really good tool to use. And then on the flip side of that, it's what do I do with it for buyers? One of the things that where I'm big on is how can I educate buyers without me having to spend time in the room with it. So and I talked about this a little bit in last week's video. One of the things we're learning with technology, that even as much as we use it, we're finding more uses to it, is that if we can record things and send it to our buyers beforehand and let them dig through things or find the pieces that are most relevant for them and their informational pieces, I get to spend more time building a relationship with them and working with them on their wants and needs and finding the home that they want. So a big piece of what we do now for walkthrough videos is we're just putting it on our YouTube channel as an unlisted video, and then we're going to send it out to buyers to educate them on different types of homes. So if you're in an area where you have like 4 or 5 specific home types, like maybe you have a craftsman home and then there's a traditional style, and then there's a Victorian home or a home built in the 1970s have a certain style, or maybe you classify it by builders in your area. Maybe there's more custom builders and this specific builder has certain plans that they do. So they may be curious about, well, I'm thinking I might want to buy in this part of the town. You're like, oh, I know what those homes look like, and then you can send them that content and educate them on the house before they ever walk in. There's a lot of different ways that you can use it in terms of educating them through the contract to close process as well. We're taking those videos and working with them on what to look for when you're in a home inspection. Some buyers don't know what soffits are. Some buyers don't know, how to look at the age of an HVAC unit or something along those lines when they're walking through houses. So there's ways to provide valuable content to them with these walkthrough videos that you guys are already producing. And again, this goes back to the concept of pillar content, where you take a piece of content that you're producing and we're using it in multiple places and in different ways as well. So the other thing that came up was the use of 3D tours. So as you probably have heard in your market at this point, everybody's wanting to know, is it possible to sell a home without ever walking through it? And one of the big ways that people are saying that it can be done is through the leveraging of a 3D tour. Now, there's a lot of different tools out there that you can use. The biggest one that you've probably heard of is Matterport. And while we've used Matterport before and we liked them, they were just fine. And I think the quality of the pictures turn out a little bit better. We found another source that allows us to do them either with a 3D camera of our own. So you can buy 3D cameras that are not $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. You can find Matterports on sale on eBay too, by the way. But overall, these cameras are like, $100, $150 at most. Or you can buy kits from companies that turns your phone into a pano kit that revolves around the room, and it'll take pictures of the room, and you can do a 3D tour. We just did one, and it was like $40 to get it all put together by the company. We just took the pictures, sent them out to the company, and they put it all together for us for $40. And the way we're leveraging that is that now our agents are armed, because you have to get an account. So we're getting an account for people, and if they go out and we talk to a FSBO, we're showing them the technology that we're using. We're showing them the 3D tours. We're showing them the walkthrough videos that we're doing. And if they're not willing to list with us, then we're saying, well, would you let us promote your property? And if they say yes to that, then we'll say, great. What we need to do is come out and get just some photos of the property. And, we can even do a walkthrough video if you're okay with that. And what we did with that was go out, get a quick and dirty photos of the house, get the 3D tour put together of the house, and let them use that with our branding on it. So we'll let them use that. And then what we're doing is building an off-market property list of expired or FSBOs, because maybe people don't want to be on the market right now, but if we get interest in it and someone wants to bring an offer in and just looking at the 3D tours of the home, maybe they'd be open to buying that property. And for our FSBOs, if they don't have a digital presence right now, there's a lot of the conversation has changed with FSBOs. If you guys aren't calling them, now's the time to start building a relationship with them. Depending on how long they've been on the market, they may or may not have noticed the level of calls they're getting have dropped, the showings that they've gotten have dropped. So now it's more important than ever to present them with a digital presence. And if you have these tools that you can do it very quickly, speed is your friend in this case, because you can get these things up and running at a high level before anyone else can get there. I know in our area, one of the things that we ran into was getting a Matterport camera with one of our photographers sometimes was a week out, 7 days, 10 days out. With FSBOs now, we can be there the same day. And if they don't want anybody in their house, we'll go in, we'll take the photos and then put it online on an off-market property list that we're creating. Side note, that's one of our niche websites we're building right now, is another website just to house the listing videos we've done and just to house our off-market property videos. And then what we're doing is building that relationship with those sellers, saying, hey, look at what we have going on here. Just so you know, and every Monday we're contacting them saying, what kind of showings did you get? Did you get any phone calls? And they'll say, no, we didn't really see anything. And then we're able to show them the data of what we have on our end. So that's a cool way to leverage those 3D tours if you're doing those, or walkthrough videos. You do the same thing with a walkthrough video. Go through the house, offer to do a quick video of the house, put your branding on it, send them the branding. The worst with the video, the worst that happens is they take it and they put it on their wherever they want to put it at, send it to their friends or whatever, and it has your branding on it as an agent. So you can still bring value to them, even if they're not willing to list with you. That'll drive traffic back to your digital resources. The other thing that we thought through was what if I have no listings to market, right? This is an interesting question that some people are saying right now. People aren't putting their homes on the market. I have no listings to market. How can I do any of this marketing? And one of the things that I thought about was, well, if I can still get out of my house and I'm considered an essential service, then I would go out and find those listings in my area that are marketed by agents who are not very tech savvy. We have several in our market that may have photos done of homes, but they don't have any videos. So we just reached out and said, hey, would you like us to do a quick walkthrough video and a 3D tour of your home? Happy to do that for you and help you out. And then what we'll do is we'll actually give them an unbranded copy of it. And then as long as I get to promote it with my marketing and everything. So it would create a listing inventory for myself that's not my listing inventory. At the same time, it still gives me the opportunity to promote properties and still be in the game if I had no other inventory on the market at this time. And then the third level of that was, what if I have no listings to market? And I'm on a total lockdown where I can't leave the house. I can't go shoot videos. We can only service, properties that are under contract. I thought, again, that's an interesting position. And what I would do then is I would go to those agents still and do a Zoom webinar, something like this. And even if they don't have a video done or a 3D tour done, you could do a slideshow and let that agent talk about the property. That's invaluable to buyers looking online right now. You just record the Zoom webinar of that particular property and let them talk over, this room has this feature in it. This kitchen has this in it. These are these type of floors in here. Did you see this in the back? They'll point things out that even if you can't really hone in on it because it's just a photo or a slideshow, you're still turning it into a video experience for people with a voice overlay on it that gives them a lot of context about a home that they can't get just from a photo. So however you look at it, there are ways for you to go out and create business for yourself, or to create this listing repository of videos for yourself. And then what you can do with all of that, and then, again, going back to the education piece, is store all these videos and you can use them to brand yourself, right? Show other listings that this is what we do digitally. This is what we do to sell your home in any environment. That's one thing we're doing right now very heavily in our market is we're marketing out to all of our database, but also these off-market properties, any expires, any FSBOs. Hey, this is what we can do digitally for your home. This is how we can help you sell your home in any environment. And then the last thing to think about is when you're educating people, think about who you're sending things to inside of your database. We use these videos to promote our properties to our own client base still. Sending this out with hey, this is some of the technology that we're rolling out right now. Here's some of the things we're doing. We're asking them to evaluate it. We're saying, hey, what do you think's great about this? Getting that community interaction. Again, if you're not using a Facebook group at this point, I would encourage you to set up a Facebook group for your client base. Add them to the Facebook group and then put stuff in there to get interaction, get their opinion on stuff. People love sharing their opinions on colors on walls or fixtures in houses or, the view from a back deck, or if there's something cool about the house. Some people will love it. Some people will hate it. It will give a really good conversational atmosphere. And also at the same time for you, it's showing your database what you're doing to help them. If they ever think about buying or selling, you're staying top of mind. It's good content building for you. So using it to drip out to your database as well over a period of time. Overall, that's the different angles we've seen on using 3D, using video walkthrough tours. Bill, any questions on that? Anything else you want to dig into?
I think that's a really, really good primer for the different things that they could be doing. And just to build on it too, like I really love the point you talked about where if you're in a state, like we have a couple of clients in different states that are on lockdown where real estate agents are considered non-essential. And who knows what's going to happen as the next couple of weeks move along in those states where we might currently be considered to be essential. So a lot of this is about preparing in advance for something that may or may not happen. So the point I like that you made about taking the photos that we do have, and if we are on lockdown or we can't get into that listing, then creating some sort of a slideshow where you're doing voiceover and describing the house to them. So just as if you were walking a buyer through the house and you're just using what you have. So I think that's a very, very resourceful approach to this. So let me kind of put the black hat on for just a second, Ben, and let's imagine that I'm watching this right now and I'm saying to myself, well, yeah, that's easy for that Mathis guy to say. He's been doing this for a long time. Like I barely figured out how to access Zoom or what's this Facebook Live thing. And of course, I'm being exaggerant for effect. However, let's say I'm in a spot where this like the frontier of digital is a little bit scary for me. Where do I start?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think you start with the basics, right? We have the digital marketing course, of course, that we put together that walks you through the different steps of all these things. It gives you a good game plan on how to build all this content out. It tells you actually screen share, shows you how these things run, how these things function. I would start with the simplest piece of it. And that first going back to it would be creating the content, doing the walkthrough videos, hands down, building that library, even if you don't do anything right this second. You have it to use whenever you decide to use it. So I don't think there's a way you get around not doing that type of content right now because the opportunity is so great. And our sellers are just so wide open to it right now where they're like, please do that type of stuff. So the opportunity is ever going to be greater. So I think that you start there, and it's pretty simple as just picking the phone up and just just walk through the video. Take this thing and just walk through and do a video of a house. Get started doing it though, one way or the other. And then the next piece of that, if you're going to dig into any area of promotion for yourself, I would say do it inside of Facebook at this point. So if you're going to learn any tool right now in terms of marketing things, I would say start with Facebook. Don't get caught up in all the other learning TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, all these other places right now. Start with Facebook, build out from there. I know we're fond of saying at the coaching company that we started with Facebook. That's what we really worked on mastering before we moved into other areas, just because your lack of focus can cause you to just paralyze with fear, not go anywhere. So that's where I would start. And again, that digital marketing course, we built it specifically with this in mind, that if you wanted to get a jump start and walk yourself through it, it can help you.
Sure. Well, I think you make a great point about not fragmenting one's attention. So I think that's a good jumping off point for us to talk about. We started at the call by saying headwind, outworking the competition, staying focused on activities, ideas for database, and now we've gotten into technology. A concern that I have, and maybe you could speak to this a little bit, is sort of the technology time trap of people who are going out and implementing some of these new things. And so what advice would you give to folks about the balance between the tried and true, like communication one-on-one with your database and adding these layers of technology to it? How do you navigate that balance?
Good question. I think it starts with database always. I think you start, and we talk about this, especially if we've done a launch meeting with you as a coaching client, or you've been on any of our calls or any of our trainings. It always starts with database, technology, and then other. And the one thing I remember hearing someone say one time is the order of a list matters. And we put it in that order for a reason. So going off from the top of the call today, just talking about the different levels that you can talk to your database and still strengthen those relationships and have those conversations with them. I think you start there. And then for me in this position right now, I would say I would go after the people who are raising their hands still on the market, FSBOs and expireds, man. I think they still need to sell. They're still out there. They're looking for solutions. Come up with some solutions, even if it's virtual. The conversation we're having is, and again, I go back to, I think it's a time frame conversation. So there's a big difference between anticipation and expectation. So I tell everybody right now, my anticipation is that the government mandate ends on the end of the month. So that's what I'm basing my conversation timeframes around. However, if it shifts, I'm going to shift with it. I'm not going to freak out about it. If you have an expectation of it being lifted, you set yourself up to be very disappointed if it doesn't come around. So for all of our conversations, we're talking to our sellers around that time frame towards the end of the month where I think there's going to be a golden opportunity for sellers. And this is the script we're using, by the way, if you guys want to jot it down, that we're using with expireds and FSBOs. There's a golden opportunity in a very narrow window at the end of this month for you to go ahead and get your home ready to go on the market, so that as soon as everything is lifted in our area, you can hit go on the first week of May and be ahead of everybody else by 3 or 4 weeks, when we know there's going to be demand and not a lot of inventory. Because if you're tracking numbers in your market, like we said earlier, the inventory is diminishing. People are withdrawing properties. There's less active going on. Sales are still happening, though, so they're taking that inventory off. So there's already an inventory shortage that's going to be worse by May 1st. So it's helping your people get ahead of that curve so they're not behind it is big for us. So that's the conversation we're having right now. So I would say database first, have those conversations. And then if you have nothing else in your pipeline right now, I'd be going after FSBOs and expireds, and then I would be going into these marketing things. And as far as the time split for us, it's like I said at the top of the call, 4 to 6 hours in lead gen mode a day right now, at least 5 days a week. And then if you have additional time throughout your day, that's where you spend it on projects, right? Again, going back to the 4 Ps, productivity comes first. You got to, Jim Rohn was fond of saying, let go of the 97%, especially in times of duress. And that's where we're at right now. It's a lot of stuff going on. You got to let go of the 97%, really concentrate on your activities, setting a number out for yourself, and not treating this like a spring break. This is time for you to take territory, not give it back.
Right. Well, and you and I were chatting about this as we were coming into today's video, and that if you had to pick between really focusing on the productivity piece and then not allocating too much time to projects, or using this as like almost like a holiday break, like we'll sometimes see people do this like over the Christmas holidays as things kind of slow down a little bit, and they'll use it as time to dig in on project work. And using this time to dig in on project work and forsake the productivity activities is a big, big risk. I'm not saying if you can do both, do both. If your organization can do both, by all means, go for it. If you had to pick, though, the pick is productivity. Because on the backside of this thing, you can solve a lot of problems if you got excess cash flow, and you can deal with a lot of messes with extra money. The opposite of that is you end up with really, really good systems or these projects knocked out, and then a cash flow crisis in June and July. So I think you make a really good point too, Ben. Let's talk quickly on the expireds for sale by owners. As we're recording this live, it's April 1st. If you haven't looked at your expireds today, I bet there's a big number because there was probably a lot that expired yesterday. End of the month, end of the quarter. When I was still in production, about 40% of my business was expired. I loved the first day of the month because there's just more to work through there. So you're looking at expires for sub-owners and withdrawals, because in particular withdrawals right now, because a lot of those folks are looking at it and they're saying, I don't really know how I could sell my house in a situation like this, either because I don't want people in it, or people don't want to come in it, or there's lower activity, or whatever the reasons are. And what you're doing here, Ben, and what you're advising to the team is building that bridge digitally, so that now you can say, if there was a way that we could do that, or if there was a way that I could show you that we could still effectively market your property, even in the face of all of this, is that something you'd be interested in learning more about or not? And so now you're bridging that gap digitally, which I think is just a super, super important point. So any additional thoughts you want to weave into that before we wrap up?
I think you're spot on. I think it's not a or conversation of productivity or projects. I think it's an and if you can make it happen, and if you can't, you have to let the thing that was going to make you money take precedence, and that is the lead generation, that is the productivity, that is doing the activities daily, sticking to a schedule. I think have that time parameter of around 4 hours scheduled for that's important. And then the messaging, and this is something we can talk about in the coming videos or over the next couple of weeks, is kind of the messaging that we're going through, the different funnels we're setting up around all that to give you pieces of, it builds into the conversation of the lead generation for the people either you're generating through inbound leads, or maybe you have a repository lead sitting there, or your database. So, but I think it's definitely action first. Right now is the time to go.
Absolutely. Great job today, as always, Ben. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this. Friendly reminder to join us on Thursdays at 5 p.m. for Live Music Happy Hour, Fridays at 12 noon for Thought Leader Friday. This Friday, we're going to be interviewing Mike Ashcraft, who is the pastor and leader of a mega church in Wilmington, North Carolina. He's going to talk with us about perspective and mindset. He leads a staff of over 100 people and how they're leading and demonstrating their value through this. And there's a lot of messages in there that are transferable over into the business. So thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.